wanted to talk to you about abortion. And the reason I'm talking to you about abortion is that I'm an OBGYN. I practiced in this area in Various Center in Niles, Michigan for about 10 years, and then took on a leadership position in the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. So while I am still a board certified obstetrician gynecologist, I do mostly AAPLOG work, and that involves talking about how abortion affects women, as well as how abortion affects the human being in their womb. So we are in a new era, and that's why I was invited to talk to you and just update you, just to explain what's happened over the last year and where we go from here. Let's talk first about what happened in our country 50 years ago, and then just this summer. Well, you probably are all familiar with the court case Roe versus Wade, but there was a second court case, Doe versus Bolton, that also happened 50 years ago. What Roe versus Wade did was to say that all the laws in all the states which prohibited abortion were no longer able to be enforced. What they said was the state can't make any law in the first trimester. In the second trimester, Roe said the state can make some laws based on the safety of the mom. And in the third trimester, the state can make some laws based on the possibility of fetal life. But at the same time that Roe was issued, all of those possibilities involved a health exception. Okay? So that the state can't make any law that affects or where the woman has to have an exception for her health. What does that mean? Well, on the same day that Roe versus Wade was decided, there was a second Supreme Court case called Doe versus Bolton. And Doe versus Bolton defined health in the context of abortion. And Doe versus Bolton said that health means any physical, psychological, familial, or any other reason. So it was the combination of Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton, which not only struck down the laws that existed all across the country prohibiting killing human beings in the womb, but also said that any exception for any law that is made has to have this health exception, which means any reason whatsoever. It was the combination of the two that legalized abortion throughout 9 months of pregnancy through birth. Well, what happened this summer? The Dobbs decision happened. It was an amazing act of honesty on the part of the Supreme Court. They said Roe versus Wade claimed that there was a constitutional right to abortion. There isn't a constitutional right to abortion, and there's never been a constitutional right to abortion. Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court made it up, as did making up Doe versus Bolton. So out of thin air. And the Dobbs case said, look, we should never have gotten into this in the first place. Medicine is the responsibility of each individual state. And each individual state is responsible for making laws concerning abortion, not the Supreme Court. So this was an amazing thing that happened. It's wonderful that finally we have some sanity. But Dobbs is not the end of the discussion about abortion. Dobbs is only the beginning. As we saw in Michigan, some states, like Michigan, are going to say killing human beings in a mom's womb is a constitutional right. That's what we unfortunately decided in November. Other states have said, no, we're going to protect those human beings in the womb. And so now we're in a very long 50-state discussion debate that finally gives us the possibility of talking about what abortion is and what it does to women and why it should be banned in all across this country. So let's talk about what an abortion is and how it's currently done. It's really important that we understand abortion is a very old term. It's been around in medicine since we've had women who miscarried. And that term was before we had ultrasound. That term was before we had modern medical science. So The term has lots of different imprecise meanings. What I want to do is to help you understand what the term is that we're talking about when we talk about banning abortion. What does that mean? And so we have to be very, very precise in our language, because banning abortion has nothing to do with miscarriages, which it have nothing to do with ectopic pregnancies. So let me get in and explain what it means what abortion means strictly, and why it means that, so that you can understand and have an intelligent discussion about this issue. So Merriam-Webster says abortion is the termination of a pregnancy, that is, the pregnancy ends, and with that, it's accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the embryo or fetus. Well, the term abortion typically, in this context, has meant the ending of a pregnancy before 20 weeks. Because when you end a pregnancy after 20 weeks, those babies can survive outside the womb. So when we talk about this ending the pregnancy in this particular definition, understand we mean babies that cannot survive outside the womb. We're going to talk a little bit about babies that can survive outside the womb to make a specific point later. So let's go with this definition, and there's two parts of it that are really important to understand. One of them is the separation of the mother and the fetus. So when you have a time when the mom is separated from the fetus, then that separation, it's a necessary part of this term abortion, but it's also accompanied here by the death of the fetus. So moms can be separated from the human beings in their womb, their baby, for a couple different reasons. One, it can happen spontaneously, and that means without any human intervention. This is what we call a miscarriage, especially when it happens before 20 weeks. It's a miscarriage because the baby dies, and this isn't something that we cause to happen. This is something that just spontaneously happened without any human intervention. But we can separate the mom and the fetus because of human intervention. And sometimes that separation is necessary to save the life of the mother, or to try to save the life of the fetus, or to save at least one of them. So we call that, it's better termed, a premature parturition or a pre-viable separation. Those are done with the intent, below 20 weeks, with the intent to save the mom's life. When you do that kind of separation afterward, where the baby can survive, you separate the mom and the baby by C-section or in the hospital, where the mom can be cared for because it's a life-threatening condition, and the baby can be cared for, and we can offer the baby the best possibility to live. So those kinds of pre-viable separations, ones that happen because of human intervention, done in order to save the mother's life, or in order to save the life of the mom or the baby, they're done for the purpose of life, the purpose of helping both the mom and, if possible, the baby. But we want to contrast this with an elective induced abortion. The purpose of an elective induced abortion is to produce a dead baby. That is, the mom and the baby are separated for the specific purpose of making sure this baby dies. Why can I say that? Well, in the partial birth abortion Supreme Court case, the justices asked the abortionist, look, you've already delivered this baby to the point where only the head is left inside the mom. Why don't you just deliver the baby? And the abortionist answered, because that would result in a live baby. And the product we are paid to produce is a dead baby. We are paid to make sure this baby does not survive outside the womb. And to illustrate that even more, if you look at abortions done after 20 weeks, the ones that are done in 24 weeks and 26 and 30 weeks, those babies could survive outside the womb. And if an abortion is induced and the baby comes out alive, what do you call that? It's a failed abortion. It didn't fail because the separation failed to happen. The separation happened. Mom is now separated from the baby. What failed to happen in that failed abortion is the baby failed to die. So be very, very clear when we're talking about banning abortion. We're talking about banning elective induced abortion. We're talking about banning those procedures which are done for the purpose of killing that human being in the womb, making sure that human being does not come out alive. That's the purpose. And that is why an elective induced abortion is not medical care. Elective induced abortion treats no disease. There's no reason, no medical reason, to have an elective induced abortion. This is an attempt to solve a social problem by killing that human being inside the mom's womb. Currently, over half of the elective abortions in this country are done with mifeprint. There are over 70 different websites where a woman can obtain an abortion by mail with no medical oversight whatsoever. The abortion industry is pushing hard right now for do-it-yourself abortion. And they know full well that enough women will be harmed and die, that then they can argue that legalizing abortion will be good for women. It's a heinous problem. Well, since you know that there's no verification at all, who's going to have access to these drugs? You can imagine that this is a boon for people that want to abuse women. So here is one case. I just picked 3 random cases, but there's cases like this popping up all over the country. Here's a woman who was tricked into an abortion because her boyfriend slipped her the abortion pill. Here's another guy who slipped the abortion pill into his girlfriend's smoothie. He got 22 years in prison. But if you're a doctor who does it, you only get 3 years in prison. Abortion pills are now being used later and later in pregnancy. And if you go past 13 weeks, the failure rate, 1 out of 3. It's over 33%. So what does that mean? When women are further along than 13 weeks pregnancy, they hemorrhage. They have a massive amount of blood loss. And if that woman is in a situation where she can't access emergency services, then a life-threatening bleeding can lead to her death. Now we're seeing a push for willy-nilly access to abortion drugs with no medical supervision whatsoever. This puts a woman in grave danger. The first argument is, oh, well, it's just a blob of tissue. The truth is, we are all just blobs of tissue. And the baby in the womb is as much a blob of tissue as you are. Some of us are blobbier than others. We all have a human body, and this body has the image of Christ. So that means we are not just simply the body that we carry around, the carbon, the oxygen, the hydrogen. We are creatures who have the image of God in us, and that's what makes us different. And that image of God happens at the time that the sperm meets the egg. At the time of fertilization, that human, and it's human, it's not a pig or a dog or a pine tree, that human being, and it's a being because it has self-directed organization and a self-directed life that continues from fertilization until that entity dies. That human being carries that organizing principle, that image of God, from the moment of fertilization. The first cell division is where your life started. And the tiny embryo, which will be traveling down the mom's fallopian tube right now. And at this point, implanting inside the mom's womb. At 4.5 weeks, the baby's heart starts beating. That's where we started. And that's what makes all human beings important. all human beings are our brothers and our brothers and sisters. They're our neighbors. The second lie that abortion acceptance depends on is that, well, somehow having an abortion is better than giving birth for women. And that's the lie that my organization has worked on for 50 years. We've been around since Roe versus Wade. We're OB-GYN doctors. We see what abortion does to women. It destroys women. And the medical literature is very clear that there's three big ways, among multiple ways, but three big ways that abortion destroys women. The first is that abortion increases a woman's risk of giving birth to a very, very tiny preemie. Why? Because abortion hurts her womb. It damages her womb. And women who abort are at greatly increased risk of having very, very tiny preemies just at the edge of life, because the womb can't hold the baby. There's a chronic inflammation set up inside the mom's womb. And we've known this. There's actually 170 studies over 50 years that have shown this. Abortion increases the risk of preterm birth and subsequent pregnancy. The second way that abortion hurts women is that abortion increases a woman's risk of breast cancer in subsequent pregnancies. It's not all abortion, and it's not all breast cancer. What happens is, in going from a never pregnant breast to a breast that makes milk, in that first pregnancy, you have a huge growth of breast tissue, but it's immature type 1 and 2 tissue. It's tissue that cancer cells arise from because it's immature. It's not fully differentiated. In order for that immature breast tissue to become fully differentiated, to make milk, to be permanently cancer resistant, that tissue has to be exposed to a hormone that comes from the woman's womb, starting at 20 weeks and after. So by 20 weeks, almost all the tissue in the woman's breast in her first pregnancy, almost all of it is this immature type 1 and 2 tissue. But by 35 weeks, you've got about half the breast that's now able to make milk, and milk-producing tissue is permanently cancer resistant. If she brings that baby all the way to term, to 40 weeks, 95% of her breast is going to be cancer resistant. So that first pregnancy is the single most important determinant in a woman's future risk of breast cancer. Most abortions happen in this country to first pregnancies. I know from research with other colleagues looking at the entire Medicaid database, where we were able to look at women who are on Medicaid and their pregnancy outcomes and what happens to them. It turns out that women who abort a first pregnancy, a third of them never ever have a term pregnancy. It's an event which changes their life. That means 2/3 of women who abort will go on to have a baby. And it's the timing of that baby that affects their breast cancer risk as well. If they abort and then a year later they have a baby, they have just converted most of their cancer susceptible tissue into milk production, cancer resistant. So those women who have an atonement pregnancy quickly after the abortion, they don't tend to get breast cancer. It's the women who abort and then delay and maybe never have children. Those are the women who have increased risk of breast cancer. And finally, what we know from the medical literature is that abortion increases a woman's risk of adverse mental health outcomes. Well, what does that mean? It means suicide. It means drug abuse. It means depression, major depression requiring hospitalization. Why? Because women are hardwired to bond to their babies and to grieve those babies when they die. One of the saddest research papers I ever read, was a paper that looked at women who were waiting for an abortion in Scandinavia. And what were the women doing? they were rubbing their abdomen and talking to their baby. This kind of hardwired bonding doesn't go away. The woman who's had an abortion doesn't become unpregnant. She is now the mother of a dead baby that she can't grieve. So I've had miscarriages. I've had babies who have died in my womb, and I could grieve them because I knew I didn't do anything to cause their death. But imagine how very difficult it would be for a woman to know that she had her baby and she did something to end that baby's life. And she can't go to a miscarriage support group. In fact, she can't talk to anybody about it because the people who are pro-abortion say, oh, just a law of the tissue, we didn't lose anything. Well, she knows full well she lost a child. Who is she going to talk to? And that's why these women use drugs. That's because they're trying to manage a complicated grief. That's why these women commit suicide, because they're sad. It's an epidemic of mental health problems that we know are coming from abortion and from complex grief that isn't able to be resolved. And that's something that we need to be sensitive to, especially to women who are very angry about abortion and abortion rights. Because behind those women who are angry about their rights to have an abortion is a woman who is crying, is a woman who is grieving. And we have to approach her with compassion and with understanding and with forgiveness and with gentleness. That's not saying that abortion is a good thing. That's recognizing the damage that abortion has done in this woman's life. So what she needs is compassion. The third idea that undergirds this nation's acceptance of legal abortion is sickening. We don't want those kind of people reproducing. What do I mean by that? Well, unfortunately, in this country, the money for abortion comes from people who are deeply enmeshed in population control. And the populations they want to control are you and me. Populations that are not the elite, populations that are poor, populations that are resource limited. They want to control those kind of populations, and that's why the rhetoric that, oh, poor women need abortion more than anybody else. Listen to what's being said. That woman, because she's poor, what's being said is she needs to kill her child because we don't want to support that child. Why would I say such a thing? Let me read this quote to you and see if you can identify who said it. I was surprised that the court went as far as it did in Roe versus Wade. And I did think that with the Medicaid reimbursement cases down the road, that perhaps the court was thinking it did want more women to have access to reproductive choice. At the time, there was a concern about too many people inhabiting our planet. There was an organization called Zero Population Growth, she continued. In the press, there were articles about the danger of crowding our planet. So there was, at the time of Roe versus Wade, considerable concern about overpopulation. You know who said this? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in an interview in 2009. She was reflecting on the reasons that the court decided Roe versus Wade as they did. And notice the intertwining of population control issue. Well, let me introduce you to another person, Jonathan Gruber. He was one of the architects of Obamacare, and he is from MIT, what a prestigious university. He wrote this little monogram called Healthcare Reform, and the title of the article that I read was The Gruber Calculation of Savings Resulting from Abortion. And this is what he said, proudly. From these results, we estimate that the legalization of abortion saved the federal government $14 billion in welfare payments through 1994. What a cold-hearted guy. Can you believe that they're calculating the money from dead children? Because these are poor children. That is the bottom line when it comes to funding the abortion industry. It's population control. The last aspect, the last idea that undergirds the acceptance of legal abortion in this country is if he can walk away, I can walk away. And that is where the church is being called to address. What does that mean? Well, it turns out that for some men, sex is a 5-minute commitment. And for women, it's a 20-year commitment. And this is the inequality that even Justice Kennedy referred to when he said women have planned their lives around the ability and access of abortion. Because the planning their lives means they want the ability to walk away from an intimate sexual encounter the same way that a man can walk away from an intimate sexual encounter with no consequences. But that's not the way God designed it. I want to draw your attention to a survey that CareNet did years ago of women who actually obtained abortion. And some of this is really important for us as the church to think about. Women's reasons for seeking abortion included financial reasons, timing, partner-related reasons, one third, and the need to focus on other children. Most women reported multiple reasons for seeking an abortion. So is this empowerment? This sounds like economic coercion to me. This sounds like intimate partner coercion to me. These reasons paint a picture of a woman who is in a situation where she doesn't feel like she has any choice. 38% of women indicate that the father of the baby was the most influential person in their abortion decision. But in another study, 55%. 57% of women who obtained an abortion experienced a potentially traumatic life event in the 12 months leading up to their abortion. The most important factors included unemployment, a breakup, or falling behind or rent or mortgage. Only 12% of women included any physical problem with their health as a reason for having an abortion. And these are not life-threatening situations. So look at the picture that this paints. Here's a woman who is trying to do it on her own. Where's the father of the baby? Where's the supportive environment? We are called to better than that within the body of Christ. We are called to better. 1% of women choosing abortion reported that they were survivors of rape, and less than 0.5% cited incest. This is one thing I want you to really focus on. More than 1/3 of abortion recipients reported that they attended church at least once a month at the time of their first abortion. 70% of women who have had an abortion indicated their religious preference is Christian. 27% were Catholics, 26% were Protestants, and 15% were non-denominational. 35% of Christian women who have had an abortion indicate that they currently attend church once a week or more. That means your churches are filled with women who are considering abortion or who are post-abortive in need of healing. 36% of women were attending a Christian church once a month or more at the time of their first abortion. And half of the women agreed that churches do not have a ministry prepared to discuss options during an unplanned pregnancy. CareNet also determined the amount of time between the positive pregnancy test and the decision to abort. How much time do you think elapsed? 24 hours. They made the decision within a day of the positive pregnancy test. But CareNet also determined from the time of the positive pregnancy test to the time of the actual abortion, they determined the elapsed time. What do you think? 7 days. That means she will be in church once, just once. You have one chance to save that child's life. Who is she going to talk to? How is she going to know who to talk to? And unfortunately, guys, I think it is asking probably more than is going to happen to think that a woman who's in the situation of an unplanned pregnancy is going to go to a male pastor to talk or receive counseling. It may be possible, but it's going to be the exception, not the rule. Somehow, as the church, we need to identify a woman or women in the congregation who are able and willing and prepared to talk to that girl, that woman, 24/7, 365. And that's in the congregation who are able and willing and prepared to talk to that girl. And if you have someone in your church, a female or females, who are not gossips, who are able to hold patient confidentiality, because this is actually a patient confidentiality situation. If you can identify those women to the congregation to say, hey, anytime you need to talk, I'm here for you. And make that just known to the people in the congregation. Then partner with your pregnancy care center who knows the resources. They already know the opportunities, the help that's available. The pregnancy care centers can be an effective and life-saving partner for the women in your congregation. And also for those women in your congregation who have had an abortion, there needs to be some ministry in your church. Why? You're talking a third of the women in your congregation, guys. That's a lot. There's a lot of hurting women out there. And when you don't talk about abortion from the pulpit, what that says to the woman is this is the unpardonable sin. We talk about adultery. We talk about murder. Those all must be pardonable sins, but mine must be unpardonable. And so her soul, her eternal soul, is waiting for you to reach out to her with healing. With the healing of forgiveness, with the healing of Christ's love. This is a call for our time, guys. We need to make this a priority in our churches because there's a lot of women who need help. The last thing I want to say is part of the reason that the statistics for abortion in the church are not much different than the statistics for abortion in the general population is a failure to make known and to walk the talk. We offer our bodies as a living sacrifice, right? Isn't that what the scripture says? Well, what does that mean? That means because we are Christ, we don't have sex outside of marriage. Because we are Christ, we don't put ourselves in the near occasion of sin. That means we don't make it easy for ourselves to sin. Because we are Christ, we hold marriage and sex as something within marriage, not outside of marriage. I know that's unpopular teaching. It sure is. But you know what? So was Christ's teaching unpopular. We have to get back to truth. We have to get back to a call to offer our bodies as a living sacrifice. And that means self-discipline, forgiveness where forgiveness needs to be, but understanding when you become one flesh with a person, you just became one flesh with the person. That means that the church holds this one flesh relationship sacred. And if, regardless of whether or not, that has happened inside or outside of marriage, we don't kill that human being who's the one flesh result of that sexual relationship. So we've got to teach this to our kids before they have sex. We've got to teach these to our kids and model it before they are in a dating relationship. We have to somehow, it's not just explaining, blah, 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 Fido. We have to actually live this. We have to make it clear. We're not talking about being prudish. We're talking about doing an action with somebody else that will result in a third person, that will result in another human being who can then be hurt or harmed because we wanted a good time on the weekend. So we've got to get past this intrinsic selfishness of our culture and look at the bigger picture and the meaning, and teach the bigger picture and the meaning behind sexual activity. Sex is a good, right, and salutary thing. God made it. He said, be fruitful and multiply. Good. This is good. In a context. In a context. And that context is a committed love relationship for life. That, I'm going to leave you with a few suggestions for the future. We've got some challenges. One of the challenges, the woman herself is now the site of the abortion. There's not an abortion clinic to, protest outside of, because she's getting these pills in her mailbox. The laws that we worked so hard to pass to regulate clinics and abortion providers are now nullified by do-it-yourself drug-induced abortion that comes to her as a pill through the mail. And women will be harmed about medical care complications. Women in your congregation, your teens, your friends. They're likely going to see increased psychological trauma because they're going to see the baby that they thought was just a blob of tissue, who isn't a blob of tissue, who has arms and legs and face. But there are some opportunities. There's some time to reach her now before her mail order comes in. She won't be under the same high-pressure sales techniques as when she walks into an abortion clinic. And she may change her mind. She may regret taking the abortion drug, and she has 72 hours to get progesterone. That's abortion pill reversal. Your pregnancy care center life plan can tell you about it. And finally, we have a huge opportunity for educating about the risks of abortion and the possibility of abortion pill reversal. Finally, I want to tell you a little bit about my organization, the American Association of Pro-Life OBGYNs. We have a lot of information and resources. Go to our webpage and click on resources, and you will find the answers to most of your questions. And if your doctor is not a member of AAPLOG, ask them why and invite them to join, because we're looking for more and more and more doctors to join us in life-saving medicine. Thanks.